Now, for more on U.S. President Barack Obama's three-nation tour of Africa, I am joined by VOA senior White House correspondent Dan Robinson, who joins us on the phone from right here in Washington. Good afternoon, Dan.
Nice to be with you.
It's a pleasure always to have you on the show, Dan. You've been traveling with the president for the past week on the continent, and you just arrived back to the United States. From your vantage point, Dan, how would you characterize the president's trip?
Well, you know, this is the most energized and engaged that I have seen the president on almost any trip that I have been with him on. Now, clearly the White House devised, engineered a multi-layered agenda for him from Senegal through South Africa, finally in Tanzania, focusing on, again, as you just heard, on democracy, on the potential for youth in Africa, and then also on trade and literally on power, that initiative Power Africa that he said is aimed at doubling or increasing access to electricity across the continent. This is an energized Mr. Obama in every place, from his meetings with judicial leaders in Senegal, with civil society, down in South Africa with that great town hall that he had with youth from across the country, and finally in Tanzania.
What about the message, Dan? Was it consistent, or was it changing from country to country?
No, I think it was very consistent with a little bit of difference in each place. I mean, as I said, I started right off in Senegal with those meetings in Gorée Island with the civil society leaders, with judicial leaders from across Africa, several countries, emphasizing the importance of democracy, rule of law, and basically challenging, as he also did in South Africa, challenging the youth of Africa to hold governments accountable, that they have to be accountable to their people. Also rolled out, by the way, Shaka, a couple of major initiatives. You just heard again that youth initiative. He's going to have a new fellowship for young Africans to study management, public service, to come to Washington. There's a major summit he's planning of sub-Saharan African leaders. So this was, again, this was Barack Obama in his element, talking about the issues that are important to him.
Talk to us about the mood, especially when he visited Gorée Island and, of course, later Robben Island.
Yeah, I mean, you could see, I think you all saw that photograph of him and Michelle, the First Lady, standing in the door of that slave museum in Gorée Island, looking very pensive, as he did, also looking pensive in those photographs we saw from the former cell of Nelson Mandela on Robben Island. And he said, it was important for him to take his daughters, Malia and Sasha, who had been in South Africa before with the First Lady, but important to take them to Robben Island, and talked about the importance of human rights in the overall agenda of the trip. So this was a very, very energized, but also very pensive president as he visited these locations, Senegal, Robben Island, and South Africa. Of course, did not meet with Nelson Mandela, who is critically ill. But again, this was as low-key as he needed to be in terms of Nelson Mandela in South Africa. He said he did not need a photo op. He didn't force that issue. He was respectful all along the way.
There was a time, of course, when President Obama was enormously popular on the continent. Does he seem to continue to have a sort of Midas touch on the continent?
Oh, I think so. I mean, you saw that reception in Tanzania, which was actually, according to what we saw as reporters following him, the biggest reception that he received along the trip. I mean, people were out there cheering. They were wearing congas in Tanzania with his photograph on them. I think I came back with a couple of those. So there's a lot of enthusiasm, and he tried, by the way, also, Shaka, to deal with what he said was the notion that Africans are suspicious of of the kind of militarization that some people have said U.S. policy has gone toward in Africa. He said the United States is not going to shirk from protecting human dignity, but basically it's ultimately up to African governments and countries to solve their own conflicts. That was another important message from this trip.
What about the protests in South Africa? How did he deal with that?
There was a reference to that, I believe, in the town hall. There wasn't a lot of attention paid to that, although you saw it on TV, people protesting against his policies, including in the Middle East, for example, with the Israeli-Palestinian issue. But, in the other locations, Senegal and Tanzania, I personally did not see those kinds of protests. Of course, you would expect it in South Africa with the kind of activism there with young people concerned also about global issues. But, he really didn't address that directly, I don't believe, in that town hall.
Thank you so much, Dan, for taking some time to talk with us.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome, sir.